morning, everybody. My name is Emmanuel Bonnet-Jailly, and I am the director of Big Lab, and I'm delighted today to welcome Anne-Laure Amilhat Szary for this webinar. I would like to acknowledge with respect the Langkwanghan people on whose traditional territory the University of Victoria stands, and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wassanek people whose relationship with the land continues to this day. And I would like to add that I am actually speaking from a place called as Sit Shagnath, or in English it's known as Willows Beach, which is a little bit outside of the campus of the University of Victoria, and that is also unceded Songhees land, and we have a beautiful weather today. And with this, I will introduce Anne-Laure Amilhat Szary. Anne-Laure Amilhat Szary, some of you might know, is a professor of geography in the French system. She's also the former director of a very large research lab called PACT, which is a social science center affiliated with the National Center for Research in France, the so-called CNRS, France National Center for Scientific Research. And she has published enormously in English, in French, and in Spanish, and her most recent book with Victor Konrad, who is also in attendance today on this webinar, is about border culture. And I won't say much more than that about Anne-Laure because I want to give her the floor right away. I think she should have the time to talk to us. Now, I just want to tell you very, very briefly, some of the basic rules is that we are asking you to make clear in the chat that you want to raise questions, and we will only take questions at the end of the talk, right? So use the chat box to make sure that we know that you're interested in raising questions or comments, but we won't take any questions while Anne-Laure speaks. There are too many people on this call to be able to give the floor unattended, right? So thank you so much for attending today, and Anne-Laure, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you all. Can you hear me well? I'm trying to deactivate, yeah, okay. So thanks a lot to everybody for being here. Sorry for last week. This week I was here 1 hour before the time of this, before the start of the talk, but here we are. Thanks a lot to Emmanuel and all the team at UVic that is behind the big project, which is really an amazing collective for border studies. We all met recently at the ABS conference in Eilat, and that has strengthened the links. As always, it was really nice to meet in person after COVID, but it's also a great opportunity to be together online with so many of you around the world. I'm very touched and impressed to speak about border culture. Victor is here. He's the co-author of this beautiful book, which we released at the end of 2022 after 10 years of discussions and projects. And so what I'm going to talk about is centrally about border culture. I will address the questions that are behind the book and why we made the book, and try to set up also an agenda for border culture, or for putting culture at the core of border studies. And this is why I chose the title for this. Is how I chose the title to the talk for today, discussing the centrality of peripheral issues to renew border studies. Why so, and why do I call peripheral? What do I call central? It all came from this idea that when I started to engage into an analysis of border art and border aesthetics, it always seemed like the last wheel of the car. Maybe the changing wheel, not the smaller one, not the one that you will drive with all the time. The serious stuff was about security. The serious stuff was about cross-border cooperation. And little by little, what an artistic insight into border studies was bringing for conceptualization, for rethinking very central issues, became more and more self-evident to all, to the point that we are now, I think, able from thematics that seemed, because they are social and not centrally political, because they are part of subaltern studies, and they come from heritage of feminist, post-colonial studies rather than mainstream IR, themes that used to be seen as something that comes after the main topic, things that now are, I believe, at the core of border studies, and this is what I want to show. So I'm building on the book. The central hypothesis of the book is really assessing that what borders are doing to cultural transformations, and what borders are doing to contemporary cultural transformations can not only contribute to an understanding of geopolitics as a broad social and cultural phenomenon, but that this can also establish the complex political role of culture in contemporary societies. Indeed, both Victor and I are geographers, and we believe that border and culture offer two ways of gaining a sense of human spatiality. And through the book, we witness their rapid and complex transformations of both border and culture in recent times. But not just all politics are cultural and all culture is political, and this is what the talk is going to address. So where do I speak from is also very important. I am a geographer. I was the co-founder of a collective more than 10 years ago now that is still active through one important thing, which is its journal. It's online, it's bilingual, it's free of access. It's called the Anti-Atlas Journal. We issued a manifesto which seemed both simple, ambitious, and realistic and utopian, as are all manifestos. It was published as a paper in the JBS, and a lot of what we were asking for or pleading for at the time has been made possible in the book. Basically saying that we should not only analyze border from an external point of view as scholars, but that we should engage in different manners with people who do the border, who live them, and these be military people, border police, but also hackers, people crossing borders, people living daily borders by commuting, by going to school, etc., etc., and of course artists and people who engage aesthetically with borders. So the structure of my talk today will follow these 4 points, showing you that our thinking was trying to do more than just culturing borders or bordering culture. And I will conceptually and theoretically establish the need to explore the border culture nexus, and then illustrate this, showing you how peripheral concerns are very acute, and so acute that they could become central for our discipline, if border studies are a discipline, at least for our field of studies, which is more what I feel it represents. So the first point, what we did, I think, and Victor will correct me if he has another point of view, is more than culturing borders or bordering cultures, but really thinking centrally about this link. And when we speak of borders of culture, we come to definitions, but we've been working with a definition of culture that is very broad as possible, that goes way beyond this notion of visibility, invisibility, of a visual sphere or visual field, a visual sphere. But this was certainly, this question of the visibility, invisibility was a starting point in my trajectory of thinking in border culture, in border culture. If you may all remember this very seminal paper by Nicholas de Genova, saying that the border was both seen and obscene, and that there was an issue with the growing spectacularization of border. Growing spectacularization on the field, with the building of walls, with the building of a whole mise en scène, a whole setting of border action and performing bordering through this spectacularization at the border, but also through a dissemination of acts of spectacularity of the borders. And one of them is that very interesting picture here on the screen, where the Chinese ambassador in Pakistan offers the foreign ministry of that country a tapestry, which by all means has nothing you wouldn't like to have in your living room, but which is which objective is totally political. It represents the Great Wall of China. And this Great Wall here is not just a closed border. It materializes, it's not simply the way that China was able to defend itself, but that it was able to build a mark of moral distinction. It was also operating for the Chinese as the Adrian Wall was in other contexts operating another dynamic dyad, the division between civilization and barbarism, why us and them in Chinese Hua and Yi. So in this, through this gift from the Chinese ambassador to the foreign ministry, there was certainly it was playing a game. It was really the expression of a game of power. Not only are we more powerful than you are, are we establishing soft power by the building of ports and infrastructure in Pakistan, but we are also bringing it our culture, our view of the world, and this will be through. You have to share this by putting that on your wall. There's in a paper that mentions this gift, a colleague called Callahan refers to Kant, who uses the difference between the beautiful and the sublime, where the beautiful refers to the form of an object, which consists in having boundaries. The object is beautiful because it is harmonious, pleasurable, within accepted measures of judgment. However, the sublime appeals to a momentary arrest of our interpretative faculties that excite a shock that can be both horrible and pleasurable. And I think in this these dialectics between the sublime and the beautiful, we enter into the complex definition of culture that we have wanted to work with in the book. And that definition of the sublime and the beautiful is also very much present in this game of understanding that was called upon when Trump launched his campaign to build the wall for around America and asked the Mexicans to fund it, by the way. And he chose a few contractors and asked them to display prototypes at the border. And these looked very neat from far away, especially in the dim light that you can find when the fog is there. And a Swiss artist actually put up a petition in 2018. He's called Christoph Buschels, and he asked people to collectively admit that Trump had produced here a work of border art that he was addressing people's, and he was, by that petition, it was what Christoph Buschel was trying to do is to show that by building the wall, Trump was not only exerting power, military power at the border, but he was building his influence, and he was trying to transform the imagination and the way that people deal with the border. Sorry about the beep beep. It's when people come in. I've tried to disable it, but it's still there. So everybody sometimes comes in. I have a beep. Anyway, so what we try to do in the book, and this is why our reflection lasts for more than a paper, is that we do not only look at the way borders territorialize culture, because that would be an easy way. Like, okay, there are borders, and borders are around territories, and in those territories are built. In those territories, national cultures or mix of regional cultures are expressed. They stop at the border. There is a transition on the other side of the border. Begins another set of localized, territorialized cultures. But in a very interesting manifesto called Against Borders, the Case for Abolition, Gracie May Bradley and Luc de Noronha say that by thinking about the problem of racism and borders from the perspective of formerly colonized populations, we see that the deeper problem is the territorialization of land, people, and cultures, and their transformation into national property. This reckoning with the inherent exclusive nature of the nation state demands that we develop alternative political forms and ideas about movement, land, culture, and difference. And the italics are mine. I think this is without neither of us, neither Victor and I, being very absolutely radical thinkers. I think that what we've been trying to do here is to debunk this idea of that culture is territorialized, or to think ways in which, understand ways in which this territorialization relates to border conceptualization in more complex manners. What we try to do too is finally to bring to have a very wide view of culture, bringing the mundane into the light and bringing the light onto the mundane, looking at popular border cultures, such as the one that is expressed in these beds that come from the Kukapa culture, autochthonous culture that is at the around around Mexicali and at the border with the US. And this, you see on the picture, is a map of the river, the fish, and the mountains that surround that river, the Colorado River, which is almost left without water because the cultures, agriculture on the American side, take it almost years. This is a map that doesn't show the the geopolitical divide that crisscrosses the territory of the Kukapa, and thus it explains other layers of cultural intercourse and cultural expressions in this region that help understand how people work, live, think, imagine, dream on each side of the border. What we try to do too is to have intersectional approaches of all types of border and see how culture related to that. And that is expressed, for example, in this very interesting video by an artist called Pierre Valls, who lives in Mexico, where he works on how the women who come from Venezuela go to Colombia to sell their hair for money because they're out of any resources. And the ones who are going to actually buy this hair are Colombian women who want to cross other borders, that of capital. They want a rich man or husband. They want to go to other countries. And so you engage with multiple layers of bordering through that approach of culture. We wanted to also escape a politics of pity based on the spectrum of suffering, and to show how examining culture at the border was also a way of examining agency at the border. So what we came to find is that border culture is not just culture at the border. That would be too easy. And isolating one function or one aspect of the border does not allow us to grasp the flexibility of this institution. This is, I think, my best quote from one of the best books on borders that was released by Sandro Messager and Britt Nelson, called The Borders Method. And what we try to do, and what we really want to discuss with the people who will read the book, is to look at culture both as a possibility of resistance to dominating border regimes, but also as culture has been part of an hegemonic landscape, meaning that hegemony from the Gramscian point of view is the idea that the dominating groups are able to convince the dominated class that they will abide with their dominance, and the diffusion, for example, of popular culture and the acception of values of perceptions of the ruling class by the dominated one are ways of consenting to that culture. So what we do in the book is try to spatialize these two aspects of culture as struggle. So establishing the need to explore the border culture nexus. So since we work with this very broad view of borders and culture, we try to think, well, are there aspects of our lives that do not have borders? Well, one of them you may think is love, but of course, love has borders. COVID has told us that it could be very hard to live on both two sides of the border when you're in love. And actually, there's a very interesting monument to border love, which is the Haskell Library that straddles the US-Canada border on the eastern side, which is interesting because it was designed and built in 1901 by a Canadian widow in the memory of her late American husband, Stuart Haskell. And it was built, inaugurated, all this before the International Boundary Commission between the two countries systematically began to control the line. So it is on the border. and it was for a long time not a problem. There is actually now a line crossing through the buildings. This black line in the library is much more recent. Some say it was drawn after a fire that required insurance companies from both sides to separate their clients' assets quite clearly. And it was there as an easy way of leaving the border until securitization came upon the inhabitants, and since 2001, of course, the situation at that border has become much more difficult. And so as it has proven that that borders do interact with culture even when not expected. Does culture have borders? Well, there are lots of people who believe that culture have borders, and that cultures are territorialized, and that this territorialization can be mapped. Basically, it's interesting to understand that this way of assigning the other, the foreigner, to a certain territory is both explained in critical literature, such as in Orientalism by Edward Said, and also in very mainstream literature, such as in The Clash of Civilizations by Samuel Huntington. And here on this very famous map, it is of the Clash of Civilizations. You can see that the mapping is done on behalf of very specific cultural criteria, that of religion. It witnesses the backlash of essentialized identity politics. It's not just a post-Cold War phenomena, but it has very much been stressed and intensified since the end of the Cold War. And we have it in the Western world, but it also exists elsewhere. There are many people who think that culture has borders, and this is maybe why we try to also convince them of the opposite in the book. Do borders have culture? Yes. Borders have been, we're not the first to touch upon a cultural analysis to understand borders. But for example, the notion of border was one of the 4 pillars in Emmanuel Brunet-Jailly's model of theorization, his theorization of cross-border regions. So it has been attested that there are a lot of cultural phenomena that are specific and that take place on borders. But what we try to do in the book, maybe, we succeed, you have to tell, is to show that this border culture does not only straddle the border, that the border culture actually expands in space and time, and that in many ways we all live with border culture wherever we are. So what does not have borders? Love, I said to begin with. The other idea we had was also to work on non-humans, normally animals, plants, no borders. Although in this little cartoon that I'm using, you can see that the plants reproduce the nationalist narrative between them. Stranger equals danger. This is a little cartoon that is taken from a page that tries to explain to people how to behave in front of invasive species. So they are there. We have extended our way of thinking and attributing borders, including to non-human. But we did think with Victor that this game of understanding between humans and non-humans was actually very interesting, and that there was a strong link, probably to be dug in the relationship between culture and agriculture. And actually, we begin the book with two anecdotes. One quoting how in Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada, recent immigrant families were awarded community gardens, and how this allowed them to, these people who were actually refugees from Bhutan, Lhotshampa refugees, to build up a new life and settle in these settle up through this reattribution of land in their country of resettlement. And the other anecdote that we used to show that non-human don't have borders, but non-human elements such as plants and the land and the animals that grow under this within the land, actually all the insects and all this fauna that is so precious for our ecological balance today, is very much linked to our way of thinking and questioning the borders. And this second anecdote is that is reminding us that at the world's busiest border between the US and Mexico, I met a long time ago volunteers from San Diego who were regularly crossing the line to provide care to the other poorer side, and notably by helping grow food in the segregated and very contaminated colonias of Tijuana. And one of the main obstacles to developing this humanitarian initiative was that the land of these neighborhoods was highly contaminated by previous industrial use and lack of waste management. And therefore, what the voluntary people did was to cross the border with bags full of good soil, a gesture that would have been totally illegal if operated in reverse, because the US of America prohibits the entry of all agricultural material into its territory. So should this be qualified as smuggling when soil is heading south? So we started to play on that, and I think it's interesting when we look at it with retrospect, because this is why probably the book is so ambitious. It is because we all say that, and this is our dominating narrative, we all say that the invention of borders is linked to the invention of the nation state in the 17th and 18th century. And we forget two things. We usually forget to say that it's also totally linked to the invention of capitalism, and that is the borders are there to circumvene territorial sovereignty, but also to circumvene territorialized markets. And what we also forget to say is that the invention of the border dates from this Western great divide, the great divide between nature and culture, the fact that the Enlightenment, and before that, the 17th century philosophers such as Descartes and others figured out that humankind was actually different from the rest of the universe, and that this distinction was based on its capacity to have access to culture. and therefore their capacity of distinguishing themselves, of taking a distance from nature. And so what Philippe Descola does in this really very famous book called Beyond Nature and Culture is to study how emphasis was laid either on the difference in nature that confers upon each thing its unique identity, or upon other below other skies, on the connection that links all things so intimately that it becomes impossible precisely to determine the borders that separate them. And he questions the difference in the links compared to the difference in linear, provided by linear limits. So if we take this argument to what it suggests, it means that if we believe today that postmodern ontologies need going beyond this nature-culture divide, then we have to reassess absolutely what borders that have been built under this realm of division between nature and culture meant, and what means to work on the nexus between border and culture in an ontology where that does not work on such a clear division. So to give you a feeling that the book is worth reading, this is the structure. We start on bridging border studies and culture theory with a huge state-of-the-art. We then situate border culture in border theory, because we are border scholars and not cultural scholars, but I think this should be, the agenda is probably to go further than we have done it from the focus of cultural studies. And then we go through 4 thematic lenses, looking at imaginaries and cultural production, such as artistic production, but not only. We look then at the link between culture and identity, especially through the idea of national and counter-national narratives at the border. We look at cultural production in the moment of crossing. And then I think this is one of the also things that still very much needs to be worked upon, is the chapter that works to situate and to understand borders with and in and within transnational culture. So what we do, and I will finish with these 2 very broad definitions, is to bridge 2 processes, not 2 facts. Cultural theorist Mieke Baal stresses how the spatial component of culture is essential to understand the concept dynamically, and she programmatically expresses that she would like to make a more important place for the spatial coordinates that define culture, not as a collection of things, but as a process of coding, a process of symbolizing the everyday. And on behalf of geography, we hear Gordon Mitchell, who says that there is no culture in the world, only different arrays of power that organize society in this way, and not that. Hence, there is only a powerful idea of culture, an idea that has developed under specific historical conditions and was later broadened as a means of explaining material differences, social order, relations of power. And I think we very much follow his line. So this leads to do 2 things. It leads to look at what culture and border culture looks like on the margins of the state, in very peripheral places, and how this is not as marginal as it seems. So the first element, which is the most self-evident, is to look at culture at the border, at cross-border relationships, at what Norma Iglesias Piero calls the transborder condition, the fact that one has one foot and lives and works and dreams with one foot on both sides of a line, the transnational dynamics that develop from these kind of conditions, with communities being separated on both sides of a border, but beyond. Think today of all the African migrations that developed all through South America, especially with people crossing the Atlantic to arrive to Brazil, then going up the way all through the Brazilian frontier of soy and working in slaughterhouses and the rest to make money, and then crossing the Darien, crossing Central America, arriving in Mexico, and with the dream of arriving to the United States, which doesn't really always happen, and more trying to find a place which is totally new for Mexicans in that country. So when we talk of culture at the border, we usually use words that for us border specialists have a positive connotation, that of hybridity, that of with a mistake here, liminality. We have this idea that the mixing is interesting, is positive, that it brings things that are stimulating, and that from the cultural point of view, these encounters can really be assets for people's lives. This is not this is not, however, the main assessment on what happens at the border. There is a lot of rejection of this hybridization process. And there's also one problem today, one main problem that is not very much touched by cultural studies or by artistic studies. It's the fact that some people lose their life at the border, either because they die or because they are stopped. They're just they can lose years of their lives, come in, come back. I have spoken of people who get lost in borderization, and for that purpose I used the very interesting work of a young photographer called Mao Lavoine, who went and looked very thoroughly for 407 detention facilities in the EU. 407 was the amount of them that she could find in 2015 when she did the way she did the work, and then she did the screenshots for all of them and put them together so as to reframe this unknown territory of detention, which is gone under silence by most people in Europe who don't see it, who don't know of it, and this gives she materializes through an online archive, but also through a huge print in the gallery, giving the idea that unterritorialized border culture should be made material in some ways so that it is represented. Contemporary artists are very good at trying to distort what is so hard to understand spatially and what geographers struggle to understand. The other example that can help us to understand what peripherality is this very provocative work of Francis Alice. Francis Alice is a Belgian artist who lives and works in Mexico, and he did a work within the one of the biennial that was organized at the US-Mexico binary city between San Diego and Tijuana in 1997. Called the initiative is called Insight, and the work is called Loop. So his idea was to go from San Diego to Tijuana, not crossing the border directly, which you can do in 5 minutes if you go from the US into Mexico, especially if you have documents and you're white and it's easy. But he decided to fly around the world, and to fly around the world and to document all of his all of the steps of this flight, and send emails from all of the different places he was stopping at to cross that border. And one of them was from Vancouver. This is an homage to Big and the Victoria colleagues. So, to touching down on known land, he says, feedback. When did the journey really start? While mapping the route back in Mexico City? You were gone before you departed, she said. While I was forcing myself into the tourist condition, when I accepted to be contemplative only, when my original skepticism was absolved by the genuineness of Rangoon, when a mock project shifted to a sentimental quest for redemption, somewhere along the loop, the doing it simply evacuated this thinking, and later on, the doing became pure living. Of course, it's poetry, it's art, but this idea that there are ways to experiment peripherality and the fact that things at the border are never taken for granted are very well expressed, I think, here. What appears very strongly when we look at border culture at the border and in peripheral area is that actually there is also always something that brings us back to binaries. The easiest binary is the territorial one between country A and country B, but it's also the binary of gender transition. It's also the binary of wealth. And it is interesting that in one of his last manuscripts, Walter Benjamin wrote that there is no document of culture, which is not at the same time a document of barbarism. Because when you try to establish culture, when you try to talk of culture, you also try, you address violence. And this is, I will come back to the image that is on the right side of the right-hand side of the screen. But this is also what Derrida points at when he speaks of difference and not difference, putting an A instead of an E in the text of his that dates back to 1972. And what he says is that when you always live with difference, and you're never an ongoing process and having to be challenged by difference, it is not an easy life, and you feel a lot more challenges and even violence in the everyday. And the violence can be absolutely explicit, like illustrated by the engraving that appears on the right-hand side of the screen, where you see the two twins who founded Rome, Romulus and Remus, were the twin sons of Princess Rhea Silvia and a god Mars, who descend from the Trojan Aeneid, and they were brought up. Actually, they were actually brought up by La Louve, dance with by a wolf, by a she-wolf, as you remember, maybe. And at one moment they're big and they are becoming, becoming adults and they have projects. And Romulus actually saying that he's going to found a city, and that this city will become the more important of the world. And his brother just laughs, and Romulus says, traces a line on the ground and says, this is the limits between the barbarian and us. This is the limits of our power, but this from inside those limits, we will settle to conquer out the world. And it's just a line on the world, in the earth. So the other brother laughs, and Romulus gets very angry and kills his twin. So there is, even in the very idea of its possible materialization, the possibility of violence that is very strongly there. So what I mean here is that if we go and try and work on culture at the border, on culture at the margins, we are able to open up what a number of postmodern thinkers call border thinking. And they define this as a form of theorizing that emerged from and as a response to the violence of frontiers of imperial territorialist epistemology, and from the rhetoric of modernity and globalization. And border thinking, therefore, continues, and they emerge from epistemologies that continue to justify oppression and exploitation, as well as eradication of the difference. And what we propose in the book, in a way, is a renewal of epistemes, and to produce another kind of knowledge production, one that starts from concepts and works from the often unexpected resonances and dissonances produced by the encounters and clashes between these concepts, and the materiality that can be very distant from the one within which they are originally formulated. So let me go further with that. An alternative to separatism is border thinking, the recognition and transformation of hegemonic imaginary from the perspective of people in subaltern positions. Border thinking can then become a tool for projects of critical cosmopolitanism. I don't have really the time to develop on it, but we can come back on that from in the discussion, if you will. What it means is that border thinking creates or stimulates an epistemology of the exteriority, that is one that is outside, that is of the outside, that is from of the outside, created from the inside. As such, it is also always a decolonial project. So yes, if we go to the periphery, and if we go to the periphery and take the periphery for what it is, a place of richness, a place of mestizaje, a place of hybridity, but also a place of difficult encounters, a place of struggling, a place of difference, a place of violence, then appears the need to renew our tools, renew our concepts, renew our epistemology, and think from outside of the box rather than from inside. And therefore, if we admit that this thinking, this borders thinking, is productive, interesting, productive, intellectually interesting, then we realize that actually it's I put a 3 here, but it's a 4. That sorry for that. That actually border culture is acutely central to social theorization today. So COVID made all people aware that borders were absolutely central, because we spent 2 years having borders closed up, closing, opening, closing, opening, one closing, the other opening, nobody knowing what was happening, where you could travel to, not travel to, with what kind of papers, etc., etc. But what is more interesting of COVID, I think, is that COVID challenged the very idea of a border. You see here the little virus crossing the line in spite of all the armed forces and all the protective walls that have been built to defend the territory, because COVID made us wonder where, at what scale the borders were working. And I think this is the central question of border culture. The other one that I found, and I wish I had found before, and that I could have been in the book, is this really interesting work by an artist called Teguh Oostenrijk, which is set today in a park in Jakarta, Indonesia, upon 4 segments of the Berlin Wall that he covered with paintings, including a small white dog that you can see here, psychedelic hammerhead shark, and the word culture in Coca-Cola scripts. So the work is called Transcending Limits. And I think it's quite interesting because it's this traveling of pieces of the border wall to Indonesia, for whatever it means there. And this fresco mural recomposing elements of local culture, global culture, and asking the people, the passerbys in the park, what are the limits? Where do you put your limits? Is actually an interesting illustration of what becomes possible when you understand that border culture is much more central and present everywhere in space, and not only on the outskirts of territory. There are many more artworks that deal with this. For example, this interesting work on photography done by an artist from Pakistan called Gupta Shilpa, where she put on photos of the eastern landscape, of the border between Bangladesh and India, which looks very even. The enclaves that existed until very recently all through the border, asking what is the inside and what is the outside, and there is the inside and the outside of the nation states, but there is also the inside and the outside of the earth, with the water, with the sky, and these enclaves that are like white unknown places that appear and that have been cut into the map. And basically, and I'm almost done, I think if we consider border culture as central, that can be done through a feminist literature toolbox, recalling how the poet Gloria Anzaldúa wrote as far back as 1987 that she was the border. I am the border being the title that Italians gave to the translation of a very interesting book by Shahram Khosravi, who's an anthropologist in Sweden, who came all the way as an illegal migrant from Iran some 30 years ago. And the book is Io sono confine, I am border, I'm not the border, I am border. In the absence of this determinant, there is also, could also be discussed for a long time. I am not that border between the two states, but my existential standpoint in life is to be in this, to speak from this uncertain posture and position of being the border. And what the feminist theorists write is that our feminist consciousness is grounded in being the border, which cuts across oneself, not merely crossing borders and observing them from some detached vantage point. So if we take the border as the border culture as being central, it is possible to do so not only because we bring the border culture and the border folk culture art, the border art, the border folklore within the capitals, within the places where diasporas live, but also because actually all of us begin to think that borders are not just for the others, but we are crisscrossed with a number of layers of borders and bordering. And it's this from that definition of the self, we could possibly think of the world in different manners. So if we work that way, it allows us to look for inclusive epistemes, taking the border not only as a research object, but also as an epistemic angle. Is basically what we've been doing all through this talk. This can provide productive insights on the tensions and conflicts that blur the line between inclusion and exclusion, as well as on the profoundly changing code of social inclusion in the present. It then becomes a frame from which it is possible to think inclusion. And inclusion is always a reformative project, says Walter Mignolo. So what we finished the book with when we work with Victor is to say that border culture is at once a manifestation and an imaginary, as appears in this empty stage of a theater in Paris, where I was able to work with a theater, with a dramaturg, and trying to stage border and the possibility or not to cross them through this scenography. And I think I can stop here and try to see if a set of Q&A can resemble this table, which let some time ago people from Slovakia, Austria, and Hungary eat together without crossing the border, but which is today fenced. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Anne-Laure. That was amazing. So the question and comments are open. Please, please don't hesitate to just write your name in the chat so it comes up, and then I will just give you the floor in turn, and I'll try to take as many questions as possible. So be so kind as to just introduce yourself so Anne-Laure knows who she's speaking to, back to, obviously to all of us, but also to you and to your question specifically. And I will start with the first comment from Adriana Dorfman. So Adriana, please take the floor and raise your question. And yes, do not forget to unmute yourself when you speak. Thank you.
Well, I'll try. My connection is not so good, so I prefer to write, so it can be maybe easier to understand. I think that very often we discuss borders coming from or linking to cultural studies, and landscape is so common, so frequent, it's so central in this discussion of culture, right? But I don't know if it's a choice of choosing agents over actors over plain space, let's say, or is it some other choice or just chance that we didn't speak much about borderscapes or thank you. And it was very good to hear you, and thanks for the exchange.
Thank you, Adriana. Obrigada. No, it's a very good question. I didn't. I think I could have used the borderscapes to this. I could have put the borderscape words where when I discussed border culture at the border. Although the borderscapes evades from the border, but and then you can find the borderscape in a multicultural neighborhood and the rest. I think I just didn't do it because I've done it too much. It's in the book, and that I didn't want to give the priority to the visual, and I wanted to try to open the discussion onto a more wider discussion of what culture means at the border. But that was a choice just for the presentation. As such, it is essential. It is landscape is an essential materialization of coding and decoding of our material space, and there are so many ways in which border landscapes participates to the distinction of territories at the border, that yes, it is there very much. We do touch it in the beginning, when we do the history of the link between border studies and cultural studies, also because cultural studies, when they start to territorialize themselves with Barthes and others, they also build themselves on this notion of that social groups have worked with more or less homogeneous landscapes, even if not necessarily within bounded territories. And we also, with the book, touched the notion of landscape within the chapter on transnational borders and border culture issues. But thank you. And then, hello, my name is Dorji. So in the South Asian context, I don't know. I think because I don't know. So the question is, what will be the main role for geographers in the border studies, particularly in cross-border trade? Are there any specific lenses, approaches, theories urgent at the current scenario in border studies, specifically in South Asian context? Particularly in the South Asian context, I wouldn't know that as much as you do, Dorji, but I think what is the main role for geographers? The main role for geographers is to work with a very with the broadest possible spatial definition of what is a border, and try to work much beyond the line, and to see the impact of the border in the networks, to see the impact of the border in the thick border in the region, and to look at the formal and informal dimensions of cross-border trade as an economic issue, but also as a cultural one, as a one that relates families and I think that would be my stake. And then from what I know also, there's an important issue of, there are two important issues in border studies in the South Asian context, one of them being cross-border trade, integration, etc. The other one being also the necessity to come over some very important border disputes, and thus to participate with ideas of scenarios of possible shared sovereignty or leases or things like that have already been discussed. I think, for example, of the case of the temples on the Thai-Cambodian borders. And I think also one of the very urgent issues is that of the environmental perspective and the border. Then I have another question. I hope I answered your question. I have another question by Shubi Misra. The several practices by which border gets materialized, do you think these practices evolve into a border culture that defines their behavior? So another very good question. Yes, I do think that practices get materialized and that they defined that they evolved into a culture. A behavior would be a pattern that is set and fixed. I do not know if this exists and if we can really speak of border behavior. My way of analyzing borders is always through a triptych that is of practices, institutions, and materialities. So I think that would pretty much fit here and may probably answer your question if I'm correct, but I don't know. Yeah, you said, there we go. And I don't have any other questions in the chat for the moment.
Do we have any other questions or comments?
Angelos.
I have one, maybe. Oh, Angelo, please take the floor.
Thank you. I was trying to type my question, but I think it's easier if I just say it and ask. Thank you so much, Anne-Laure. That was great. I'm interested in love and borders, and so I was just wondering whether what you said about the US-Canada library and all that kind of interesting stuff, whether there is a section in the book where that is analyzed in more depth, or whether it was just part of your talk tonight.
The Haskell library is part of a paper that I wrote a long time ago. There is not really, I do not really talk of, I mean, we do talk of, we do address love, but I don't think there's a chapter. There's probably a book to be written on love and borders sometime, a special one. We speak more about the human, non-human, and the agriculture thing than we do speak of love in the book, unless you tell me wrong, Victor. But we speak of family links. We do speak a little bit of it, but I think as I was preparing the talk, I began to think more about it, and also because at the ABS Global Conference, Andrea Massara was presenting a talk. I think you listened to it on marriage as a figure in border art, and looking at all the restrictions on border marriages during COVID that were a way of making visible love issues at the border. But there are lots of things there. I think there was in another chapter that I wrote, but that is in French, which is called "To be born and to be born and to die at the border." I recall work that has been done on nuptiality at a time when people were marrying. They're less marrying today. It's actually quite interesting because it was proven that there are less marriages when borders open than when they are closed. But then when they close, there's probably problems for lovers, which is another issue. So there are less marriages because it's not so much a challenge to cross the border. So, for example, there were young people used to like to do things that are forbidden or hard, or so they will go into a disco on the other side of the border and stay overnight and come back through remote roads that are less controlled if the border is not totally blocked. And of course, when they do this, they meet people and they can fall in love, and they could fall in love and then marry. And then it was proven on the border between France and Spain, and on the border between France and Belgium, actually, with very intense data collections, that when Schengen came and the borders opened, that the rate of cross-border marriages fell drastically. So I don't know if marriage and love are the same, and I don't think they are, but this could all fit into a nice text, probably. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Anne-Laure.
Okay, Shukwu, you have a question. Please take the floor.
Vladimir has a question.
Okay, Fuklu from Nigeria. I don't know if they can read the question. So the question is, what should be the role of NGOs in advocating for the hybridization and inclusivity of these border spaces?
Can you repeat the question?
What should be the role of NGOs in advocating for the hybridization and inclusivity of these border spaces?
Well, I don't speak for NGOs, and I don't know what kind of NGOs, but if there are some NGOs that are ready to work and work for more and advocate for more inclusivity, of course. What I know of NGOs in the border regions is that they are active in cases of humanitarian distress, of family being torn apart, of people being separated, or of people being jailed, etc. So I think this is what they do. Then so this is one context, and the other one is advocating for inclusivity in cross-border cooperation, which is basically what a lot of the NGOs and organizations, be them business organizations or formal organizations working in the promotion of cross-border integration do. So yes, it is their role. I think the role is dual, because you cannot advocate for something without acknowledging the difficulty in promoting what you want to promote, and in this case, hybridization and inclusivity. This advocacy is interesting if you acknowledge the difficulties and the fact that a lot of people don't want this hybridization and this inclusivity. So I think that's how it could be done. Lawrence, yeah, the 45th parallel film, exactly. Yes, thank you very much. And then Vladimir asks, does any border, including regional or municipal, is cultural? Or in other words, start to produce cultural definition as far as it is delimited? Of course it does. I think any border is artificial, so it comes from a sense of that there is a discontinuity that can operate at this place, and it is performative, so it will create create a difference. It will create difference if it works and if it lasts for some time. But the big difference between the regional, municipal, and national is that I think the national ones do produce a lot of difference and a lot of have a major cultural impact, even if they do not last for a long time, because they impact so much imagination. I don't know if I answered well to that, and or if you have more questions. Angelos, yeah, Hilmi, who's another Cypriot, the bicommunal cross-border love and polarization of bicommunal children and identity in the case of Cyprus might provide for an interesting case study along the lines, and maybe an interesting comparison with studies of the forbidden. Yes, and in any case, there's a paper that I started writing a long time ago, never finished, but that is about children's identity and at the border, children's behavior at the border, which I think is about which Racema Coronado just wrote a very interesting collection right now, and I think it's also on the agenda. To work on border culture from the classroom and from the kids, and from also possibly from familial love and maternal love and paternal love, not only from love between adults. So the Cypriots have met here, compatriots meet there across the borders of the net. That's good. And and then, that's a long message from Malsavni. I don't know if Malsavni. I don't know if I pronounce well. I'm a scholar from India, specializing on the Indo-Myanmar border region. I think it's interesting and also important that you've mentioned people that die at the border. Just to give a real scenario here. Recently, at the Indo-Myanmar border close to Mizoram in northeast India, 3 civilians from the bordering district within Mizoram were found to be murdered and charred to death, possibly by members of the Chin Defense Force engaging in the ongoing anti-coup movement. Some insiders suspected conflict over finances, funding money for the rebel group, with one of the victims with a middle-aged female, and her friend simply fell victim too. Regardless of the reason, there's a growing concern of such incidents among border residents in this region, as Myanmar's latest military coup has opened up the already porous border with Mizoram, as the latter has opened its door willingly for waves of Chin refugees who have sought asylum here in the aftermath of the coup. So the civil society is very much there and has stressed that the ethnic brotherhood shared with Chins of Myanmar is there. It's an active, thriving border culture during peaceful times, and border crossing is fairly easy for both sides. But the once peaceful border is increasingly seen with skepticism. And since the pandemic, now with the civil war raging, it becomes a very different border. In this very pragmatic scenario, we can still envision a border culture without taking into account the very real security threats. I think, yes, which can also lead to possibly hostile bordering practices. I don't think that the hostility dimension and the violence dimension discards the possibility of border culture. I think culture is not something nice, and art is not something nice, and literature is not something nice. They are just ways of expressing the complexity of life. So border culture is not only about exchanging food recipes and speaking the same language, and it is about, I think border culture is about living culture through the presence of a border, because and not through the idea that we belong to a big group. I think that's, I mean, to say to put a complex idea in a more simple way, the way we think of culture, generally speaking, and culture not only as a culture from the theater and not even only popular culture, but pop culture as a process of giving meaning to life and symbolizing the everyday. We tend to think of culture usually as, and our process of identifying with the culture and building cultural meaning to life, as if we were part of a big whole, of a big group. And when we speak of border culture, we hint at the fact that we may consider thinking of our culture and building culture as being split by many lines, dividing lines, and reflect upon those lines that make every kind of identity. And I think this is very interesting. And I think this way it also answered question on the territorialization of land, people, and culture. So my question, how far can we conceptualize a border culture as such? Well, just read the book. There's a confluence of multitudes that also interact with national, neoliberal, and globalized culture, of course, and this is why we try to give as many definitions as can be from, again, the point of view of the geographer, and the idea that the spatialization of culture brings a new understanding to what it is what is a culture. A broad topic, but how do we overcome the more than culture at the border, or for return to dualisms and dualizations? Well, I think it's more than culture at the border, because it's, as I said, it's everywhere. Thinking culture as being as not as a continuum, but as potentially structured around divides and splits, and thinking of culture not as a nice mirror in your washroom, but as a cut, as thinking of culture as this mirror fallen apart on the ground, and this is who you are, and this is how you build your identity. Your identities are more of a broken mirror than of a large standing mirror. Which is, by the way, an image that I never really thought of before, but I think I will work upon in the future. And I think I more or less addressed the very nice and interesting questions by all, except there is a new one. Creative project loop of a Mexico. Creative work by artists who are not from the borders common. To what extent does this Okay, it's creative work by artists who are not from the borders common. To what extent does this type of work center border culture or provide an endemic perspective on this culture? To what extent does this work by non-borderland artists obscure our understanding of border culture or maintain it at the periphery? That is a fascinating question. I think there are lots of people in this electronic room who would like to answer it with me. I see smiles. Does it center border culture? Yes, probably, because it globalizes it maybe more than it centers it. I've written a lot on the ways in which border artists enter into a global dialogue between them, and attain through this their expression about borders, attain a kind of global audience that they would not have had otherwise. I don't know that it totally centers border culture. I think there are other more that centering border culture is a broader process that goes way beyond artistic creation. But Christian, I'm really happy to go on with this discussion later on, and these are things that I've been working on in my works on border art very much, and that I will try to address more in the future, and we are very welcome to do that too. I think that would be it. If you don't mind, there's been a lot of questions, so don't hesitate to write to me. You'll find my email on the big website, and also on my university website. And as Adriana says, we'll read the book. So yes, of course, do so. Victor and I will be very happy. And reconvene soon, I think, under big auspices for a great webinar with Michael Deere and other more great activities. I think I will give back the floor to Maya and Emmanuel to close the session. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very, very much for attending today. Thank you to Anne-Laure Amilhat Szary and Victor Konrad for this amazing book. Thank you, Anne-Laure, for the presentation today, which I thought was extremely rich and extremely interesting. And what I love the most is that you actually are telling us where you think we should do more research, which I think is really, really important as well. And with that, I want to thank you all for attending today. I think we had a wonderful webinar again. And the webinar series this year are closing now, but we will have our next webinar and we'll advertise widely as of next September. Next year, we will not offer just 4 webinars, but we'll offer 6 webinars. And so we will publish the list of webinar and our guests as well during the summer. So keep in touch with Big Lab. Keep in touch with Maya, who does the communication, and never ever forget that we have the best webinar in border studies worldwide. Thank you so much, Victor and Anne-Laure. And have a wonderful spring and summer to all. Bye-bye.